Hello, and thank you for joining us on Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger.
And I'm Lincoln L. Hayes. We've got a guest again this week. The lovely Rachel Riendeau Hayes is here to join us to talk about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was my first viewing, to which everyone I've said that to has said, what? Because, yes, I don't know. I've never seen it. It's dumb of me.
It's escaped you for so long.
And it was on Netflix forever. And I was like, in the queue, gonna watch it, and then it was gone. Mm-hmm. But you guys have seen it.
Yes.
Tell us about your first time.
I think as always, it was something, a movie that my parents were like, we should watch this because we love this movie. So as always, thanks Jeff and Donna. Yeah, I think it was just a movie that it was either on TV or I think we might have rented it. And they really had loved it and so wanted me and my brother to see it. And we, I think I'd already seen E.T. I think we were a little older when we saw Close Encounters. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I feel like thinking that it wasn't E.T. and that it was a little long, but I think I enjoyed it. I liked the spaceships, I liked the aliens at the end. Yeah, I remember liking it, as I like all Spielberg things.
Mm-hmm. Who's your first?
Said it before, but when I saw Jurassic Park, that's when I was like, who directed this? Who is Steven Spielberg? Then I did the research and found out, oh my God, he made Jaws. Oh my God, he made Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I had seen E.T., but just wasn't watching it saying like, ooh, this is a Spielberg movie.
Right.
So I found out about Close Encounters, asked my mom what it was. She's like, oh, it's a great movie. And then like that week, I don't know how this happened, but that week it was on TV. Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh, cool, we're gonna watch it. And I just remember being like just sitting there and just watching it and being like, when are the aliens coming? When are the aliens coming? And I've been trying like all day to figure out like how can I talk about like what Close Encounters of the Third Kind means to me. And it's the warmest of blankets, it's the heartiest of chicken soups. It's just a movie that, like, if I put it in, I'm there, and I want to bundle up. And it does such a great job of just putting you into the mind of the characters who are just going on this journey. And then all of a sudden it's leading up to this point, and then it just
explodes so much on
and it's just this remarkable third act light show.
Yeah.
It's such a simple concept. And the fact that it hadn't been made prior to that is somewhat surprising, but it also is kind of pushing the limits of special effects at that time. This was released the same year as Star Wars, which is nuts. That A, these two movies would come out in the same year, and B, Lucas and Spielberg would have competing films within the same year.
Right.
That's crazy town. But you look at it and it has that 70s feel. It has that pre-Star Wars feel of like, this is what space is like we think. This is what, aliens and flying saucers and all that stuff. And it's still kind of that 50s mindset of like the men from space and their flying saucers and all that other stuff, but also kind of because of his various influences, it's a lot more like industrial and almost Blade Runner-esque future that we get to see in it, which is just so neat. And I'm glad you don't see the aliens until the end. I almost wish you didn't see the aliens at all. I wish that like all of that stuff with the spaceship had just been like, we're missing it because we're not there.
Right.
And all the characters are seeing the extraterrestrials, and we're just like, we're constantly trying to look around someone's shoulder to see it. Because as I say about, signs and monster movies, it's always better when you don't see it, because then your mind creates it. And even if we had just had the silhouettes of them, we'd see these men from space and you'd fill in the blanks. Not to say that what they did was bad, because the puppetry of, what did they name him?
Puck.
Oh, I can't remember.
Puck.
Puck, that's right. The puppetry of Puck is phenomenal. And you can see how that was a stepping stone to E.T. for sure. But yeah, I thought it was phenomenal. And it's another one like Blade Runner, where there are a director's cut, and a special edition, and a special edition director's cut, and the made for TV, and it's like, which one am I supposed to watch?
Yeah, which one
we'll get to that.
one?
Which one should I be seeing? And the one that we watched, you lent us the DVDs. We watched the theatrical cut.
I think I've seen the director's cut.
You may have,
Because
that's the
watching
one that
that one, I was like, I remembered it ending differently, and I think I've seen both of them, but I do think I've seen the director's cut, because I remember after we watched it and you were describing it, because he looked it up, I was like, I think maybe I've seen it, I'm not sure, but I think thinking about it now after a couple of days, I think I have seen it.
And the story behind all the different editions is Columbia Pictures produced this film, and they were very close to bankrupt. So they were really rushing Spielberg to get it out and get it finished. It was supposed to be released in '78, but they're like, can you get it done in '77? So he kind of released a film that he admits he's not pleased with. He doesn't love the original version. So then a few years later, he went back and he did the director's cut, where we get to see inside the mothership. We get to see more of that. And then after that's released, he goes, I shouldn't have done that either. So then, I think in 90 or sometime in the 90s, maybe it was 98.
Yeah, 97, 98.
They do a special edition re-release.
And they put it in the theater, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember that.
And do they take the mothership stuff back out?
Yeah, so there were some scenes that he wanted to finish. Like, there's a whole thing where, like, the coat epoxy is there. They find a big ship in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And he's like, we didn't have the time or the money to finish that shot.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there was all these shots that he wanted to do. There's an overhead shot that's in the special edition where Roy Neary is driving and you see the shadow of the mothership go over. So that shot he wanted to get. And the only way that he could convince them to finish it was, we got to give him something more.
Right.
And he's like, all right, well, I'll take you inside the mothership.
Yeah.
And I'll show you all that. But then afterwards, he's like, I made a deal with the devil. Like, I never should have put the audience inside the mothership. That was just terrible. So when he did the director's cut, he's like, okay, let me add the stuff that I wanted to add, fix up a few things that kind of bothered me, and then take out that mothership thing.
Yeah. I'm glad that you don't see the inside of it. I prefer that. I mean, it's the same thing with like seeing the monsters. I like kind of the mystery of it, and like all those people come out of it, and it's like, well, some of them have been in there for years and years and years, and like, what is it like in there? Is it a world? Did they go to a planet? Did they just stay on this ship? Like, what is it? And I like that you don't know what it is, and that he just kind of gets on it and goes, and like he doesn't know what it is. But yeah. I'm glad you don't.
It does such a great job of knowing the limitations of the special effects at the time and knowing what you can show and what you can't show.
Yeah.
And even the buildup of that I'm sure he learned from Jaws of not showing the shark, right? So even the buildup of that, and it's like, what is so great about Steven Spielberg and why he is the storyteller that he is so Roy Neary is driving, comes up, there's lights that come towards his truck. And there's a moment where you're like, oh my God, is that a UFO? Like, I'm almost thinking that might be a UFO. Maybe that's not a truck. So then it passes and it screams at him. He's like, you're in the middle of the road, you jackass. And he yells at him. Then he drives some more, and then he stops, and we see brighter lights coming towards him. And we're like, okay, it must be a truck or something. And then the lights rise up.
Yeah.
And that moment is like, you can, even if like the first time you're seeing it, you're alone, you're like, you can almost hear the theater just being like, and it's like, that is the best of what Steven Spielberg does. Is he just takes an ordinary moment like that and, I don't know, just turns it into the best storytelling point for an audience.
Yeah. And he did the same thing in Jaws. We have so many moments where it's like, you're waiting for it, you're waiting for it, you're waiting for it, you're waiting for it. Oh, the moment's passed. Nope, there it is. And then he gets you. And it's the same thing with that. It's a bait and switch of, oh, we think it might be this right now. Oh, it's not. Oh, it's probably that again. Oh, wait.
Well, he does an excellent job, and why I love Spielberg I mean, since I was a kid, is that, yeah, he gets you into the journey with the characters, and he just crafts it in a way that you like get in the seat and like buckle up and you're like in it. So then when they experience things like that, like, you know, when the lights raise up, or like when the T-Rex is chasing, you know, the Jeep in Jurassic Park, like you're like in that with them.
Yep.
And it's like, well, what are we gonna do, guys? We have to go faster. Like, go faster. Like, you really, it's the same with E.T. Like, you feel all of that at the end when E.T. leaves, or when they're both sick. Like, and you feel like the horror when like they come into, I'm still afraid of that scene in E.T. when they come into the house in the white suits. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
And like, I'm an adult and I'm afraid of it.
Yeah.
And like, but you feel all of this stuff, and he does a great job. And so like stories like this are so fun because they're so fantastical, but like you believe it and you're in it. And that's, yeah, he's just, this is another one of those movies that you like strap in and go, and the tension is there the whole time, and you are like, when are the aliens coming? Like, what are we doing? And like it escalates so smoothly. And by the time that they like are climbing up that mountain to see like the actual mountain, you're like, what is, I know it's gonna happen, but like, can it happen now? Like, guys, hurry up. Like, it's good.
It's one of my favorite photographed films too, like the cinematography of this, and this is Vilmos Sigmund, who won an Academy Award for the cinematography in this. But there's just so many images where, like when he's on the phone, he's made the structure in his house and he's on the phone and the TV's right there, and then the TV has the image that, and you're like, and you do it like you're
right,
and then he turns and he sees it, and like that's one of those moments where it's like you are what the character is seeing, what the character is identifying with and putting together in his mind, you are.
Yeah.
And that's one of those great moments where it's like you are right in the journey with him. It's like, oh my God, that is that, and oh my God, we're gonna go and do it. And
right.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I always felt like in film school, like when I went to film school, there seemed to be like this conspiracy about against Steven Spielberg. Like everyone was just like, no, Spielberg is garbage because all he cares is about his money and making the audience feel good. It's like, well, what the are you doing this for?
What's wrong with that?
But what is their argument of that? Because
no, I've experienced that too. People like hate like super like filmy, nerdy people who I love, but like there are some people who really hate Spielberg. So when I say that he's like one of my favorite directors, people are like, why? And I'm like, because I love his movies.
Look at his movies. Which of them are just out to make money? None of them. They make money because they're so good.
Well, and this was the film. Everyone says that E.T. is his most personal movie, which it is.
Yeah.
But I actually make a case for this movie because, you know, one, he was in a bad marriage. So you get all of that in there, and even for people who love the movies, we have to kind of step back and be like, well, he destroys his family, but that's okay. Don't worry about that.
He's like, but he left his family.
Which I read that Spielberg regrets that too.
Yes.
He's like, I wouldn't have made it.
Well, he says he'd never be able to make it now because he would never in a million years leave his family.
Exactly.
Right.
But at the time, it's like, you know, you got this character who is obsessed by a vision.
Right.
And that vision, you know, it's coming before his family and whatever. And there's a way that you can see, well, that's him being a director, seeing a vision of a film, and you know, he's got to get this vision out of his head and into the movie screens. And you know, anyone who doesn't understand that or can't get behind that is not, you know, I can't identify with it. Yeah. So there's that, and you know, whatever. It's fine. But the family scenes in this movie, like the domestic scenes in this movie, are so raw and so heartbreaking. And it's, for me, I look at it and it's like it's so unbecoming of a big audience-friendly science fiction film. Yeah. To have something that real and emotional, but that's what he does best. Is he just like, you know, no, these people are us. Like we, you know, any problems that we're having in our home, these characters are having the same problems. So they make them that much more real and that much more identifiable. And that is what he does so well. Like this movie comes before, Kramer versus Kramer, Ordinary People, Terms of Endearment, when like movies started to actually look at the deconstruction of the family unit.
Right, right.
And this film is right there, and like, that scene when he's in the shower and he's just letting the water run on him, and she breaks in, and then the kids break in, and the kids saying like, "Stop crying, you're a crybaby," and all this stuff that's going on. And you're like, that scene, or even the mashed potato scene.
Yeah.
Like that scene could be taken out, and it's like you'd show it to a person, and it's like, oh, this is from Ordinary People. This is from Terms of Endearment.
Right. This is a guy having
drama.
like some sort of breakdown situation, and like
this isn't a movie about aliens. It can't be.
Right.
But he manages to get some element of family into every story.
Yeah.
And we have the great dinner table scene in Jaws. We have the kids in Jurassic Park. It's so important for him, and I wonder if that's some kind of byproduct of being a baby boomer, or from the baby boomer. Well, he would be a baby boomer, right? Because he grew up in like the 40s, and so like he's coming out of like post-Korea, how the family in the 50s were and all that stuff, and kind of deconstructing like, well, does anybody actually like each other? Do we even get along, or is it all just fake talking at each other and not actually having any deep connection? But and you're right, that's how he hooks you in as an audience, because it's like you can identify with someone in that family within this science fiction fantastical story that's going on. And you're like, oh, I feel like that kid, or I feel like the wife, or I feel like him. And then you're invested, and then when everything starts to happen, you're in it. And I love that you said when you watch Jurassic Park, you're like, we need to go faster, not you need to go faster. Because when you watch his movies, you're a part of it, you're in it. And it's not, oh, well, they're kind of screwed. It's like, no, what are we going to do? We gotta... And it hooks you so well. I loved it.
There's a great moment in when Steven Spielberg was on Inside the Actors Studio. So Spielberg's real mother was a musician, played the piano, and his father was, I think it was a mathematician or something with numbers. So James Lipton's in Close Encounters, at the end, the only way that they can communicate with the aliens is with numbers and music. And Spielberg's like, oh my God, I never put that together before that. And it's like...
That's so funny.
And like there's so many things in this movie where it's just like... And this is one of only 2 scripts that Steven Spielberg wrote. And you think, why doesn't he
He's credited as a writer on this. There was another writer, and Spielberg got it and worked with it on him, but he changed it so much that the other writer was like, well, just take my name off of it because it's not mine anymore. And I think I'm sure there's a lot more Spielberg text in a lot of his movies that we don't know about, but he's a humble enough person to be like, it's yours. I put a little salt on the steak. It's your meat. You did it. And it is interesting that he can take all the credit for it. But I also read that it's kind of an adaptation of a film that he made in his adolescence. This just kind of expounded upon and built on. And you look at, like, you see the documentaries about Spielberg as a filmmaker, and you see the films that he made as a kid with like these war films, like just out in the desert in California, and he rigs up boards with dirt on them, so when you step on them, they flip up and it looks like you've been shot, and then they spin around and fall down. It's like, this guy was born to make movies.
At 8 years old, he was awesome.
I know. He was just born to make movies. So there may be only a few that he's penned himself, but you know that every ounce of him is in everything that he's made, which is completely redeemable and respectable, and he's just the greatest. Oh, Spielberg.
There are a couple things, so this was the first, it's pretty much the first movie where a filmmaker is saying, yes, there's aliens, but there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
It was great that they were non-threatening.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of point to The Day the Earth Stood Still. But even that, like, it involves the military.
Paranoia. Yeah. This is more just like, look at the stars and just hope that there's something out there. It's a very hopeful alien film for once.
Yeah.
He got really into it too. Like at first he wanted to make a movie about Project Blue Book, about the whole, the government sanctioned investigation into UFOs.
Right.
And he wanted his main character to be someone who was the top investigator of that. But then he's like, no, it should be someone more on the ground level, like a police officer.
Yeah.
So we could. It's odd that someone who is such a credible witness would be having these visions, and we can follow the story that way. But then he's like, no, nobody identifies with a person that is in a uniform. It's got to be an everyman.
Yep.
So then he called up his friend Dick Dreyfuss, and he's like, be my everyman.
Yeah.
But
After the studio, at least offered to Pacino and Nicholson and Hackman and James Caan and all these other people.
Have you ever heard the Richard Dreyfuss talking about what he had to do to Spielberg? Sorry, he's like,
I don't think so.
He knew that Spielberg was going to like Pacino and Nicholson and everything, so he would just come by his office and he'd walk by and he'd be like, Jack Nicholson has no sense of humor. And it's like, Pacino is a crazy man. And then he finally just walked up to Spielberg and he's like, you need a child to be this movie, to be the main character in this movie. And Spielberg's like,
yep,
you're it.
Yeah.
Which is, he's amazing in this movie.
No, he's
really,
great.
Really is.
I can't imagine any of those other actors playing the part. It'd be very different. It would be a different character.
Yeah, completely. And he's written to be older too. So like Dreyfuss is too young for the role to begin with, but then he plays him with such childlike wonder that just cinches it. He's perfect in the role, and he plays the craziness of it so smoothly. Like he's not over the top in anything that he's doing. It's all just like, and is it the mashed potatoes when he says this means something?
Yeah.
Or is it the first time he starts to mold it?
Well, so
Or it's the shaving cream.
There's
means something.
the shaving cream, and then like when he's with Melinda Dillon and the kid, and the kid's making the mountain, and he's like, I've been seeing this everywhere, and he's like, this means something, this is something. But with the mashed potatoes, that's when he's like, I know you guys think I'm crazy, but this means something, and this is important. I don't know what it is. Yeah, like it's hard because like, again, like all the things he's doing. Watching it now as a husband or as an adult, like you look at him and you're like, oh my God, this is like so awful things that he's doing to his family and to his kids. But even with that, you're still with him. Like you still feel for him.
Yeah,
you
you do. You like still want him to like get there and figure it out and like. Yeah, you do, but it is definitely difficult to watch being older and being like, why is he kissing that other woman? That's horrible. And then like, then he like leaves his family, as we were just saying before. And yeah, these days it'd be like, guy, Spielberg, no, you can't do that.
And you get that like with his kid, like. You say to yourself, like, okay, he maybe isn't the best father or the best partner to his wife at raising the kids because he just gets down and is a kid with them.
Right.
But with that, it's like, well, sometimes a kid just needs to, be a kid, and sometimes he needs his father to be a kid with him too.
Right.
I mean, there's the scene when he's brushing his teeth and they come up and they hit him.
Yeah.
It's like that's the moment where you're like, I love this guy. I don't care
like,
what
he's such a good, like in my head, I'm like, he's such a good dad. But then, like, he's also not, because he definitely gives into, like, the childness. And, like, I don't know, like, when she takes the phone call and, like, he's fired, he more is focused on, like, the pillow looking like he lets the vision take over him instead of putting his responsibilities first and like being a husband and a father and being like, oh wow, I just got fired and I have children and I have a house and a wife and what am I going to do? But I mean that's it's tough because I feel like two ways about it, because there's one that the vision is so powerful and like he has to do this and he's so passionate about it and it's just what he has to do that I side with him on that.
Yeah.
But then like the adult side of me is like, no, he needs to grow up and like get it together a little bit.
Right, and some of that is like, there's a little bit that I'm still struggling with right now. It was like, you know, there's the part of you, it's like, I know that there's responsibilities that I need to take on right now, but it's like, damn it, I don't want to give up on everything.
Exactly.
That I have.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You know?
We get that big time.
Yes. We understand a lot, but we're not going to throw our potted plants through our kitchen window.
No.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
That whole
I do love that scene, though. Like, it's
so
horrible. I love
funny.
it.
And it would have been so much fun to film. To be like, all right, so what we're going to do is you're just going to throw a bunch of crap through your window. And he's like, okay.
Yep.
I'm in my bathrobe the whole time. Awesome.
But they also do it well in that it is funny up to a certain point. And Terry Garr is still very funny in it, in that she's just like, I'm okay. And she like doesn't have a big reaction about it yet. And you can see that the wheels are turning in her head to be like, what am I going to do? And then she leaves, and then it gets very serious where like she takes the kid and she's like, no, we're going. But it is comical for a while. So I think they play that out very well, that you're laughing and then you're like, oh no, it just got serious.
Oh, this just got real. Oops.
Well, and it's a good balancing act that Richard Dreyfuss does too, because he is doing these crazy things, but he's also like, there's a comic timing to everything that he does. Like, you know, he gets thrown off the car.
Right.
It's sad, but then he gets up, he's looking around, everyone's looking at him, and the way he does his robe.
Yes.
And then he walks across the street very dignified. And then he climbs into the window, knocks down everything, you hear everything fall, and then he just comes out, he grabs the ladder, and then he looks out again, and then
It's pretty funny.
And you're right, the beats in there are so perfect because it's just enough. It's almost like vaudevillian Marx Brothers stuff, and it's Spielberg's bread and butter when it comes to comedy, of just the ba-dup, 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 bum, poof. It's the best, and he just does such a fantastic job with it. I have a question for you, having seen the other versions. What happened to Lance Henriksen? Because I saw him, and I went, oh, that's Lance Henriksen. And then I never see him again until the end of the film, when it's like, oh, that's Lance Henriksen again.
Because he's on the IMDb too. Because I looked up, I couldn't remember what's her name, Melinda Dillon, the mom. She's the mom in The Christmas Story. And I couldn't remember her name, so I looked her up. And then I saw him in there. I was like, Lance Henriksen. And then he popped up in the end. I was like, oh yeah.
I think it goes. Because there's never like in one of the versions there's not more of him or less of him. I think he had written roles to be in more scenes with Francois Truffaut and Bob Balaban. And I think Bob Balaban wrote a diary. He kept a diary, and he released it. And in it, like he says, that there's a number of scenes that they had to reshoot. One, because Truffaut's English wasn't that great.
Right.
So everyone, like, when they were watching dailies, they're just like, what is he saying?
Yeah. There still are some parts that, and I'm like pretty good with French, and I'm like, I don't know what he's saying.
So I think there were more scenes with them all together, but he cut them or like condensed them just because Truffaut's English wasn't that great.
Right.
That makes sense.
So, but he's there, staring up.
That's what I figured. It was something that like he had a part in. It just hit the cutting room floor.
I just thought it was funny because he is listed on IMDb. He has a character name, and it's like, but who are you? What?
And it was one of those things. It's like, well, he wasn't quite Bishop yet, so it's not like he was like.
But there is that shot in the crowd that you're like, oh, that's very clearly like he was someone at some point in this movie that, it was just funny.
The ending, man. I mean, one, it's like, okay, before I die, I have to go to Devil's Tower. I have to see that. But one, it's like him picking the perfect spot, the perfect location for it. Knowing that there's it's on every poster. That's the that's the image, is the
Yeah,
Devil's
yeah.
Tower with the spaceship rising
I mean,
behind
that's the
it.
first thing I think of when I think of the movie. Yeah.
Which is hard since the movie's been in the zeitgeist for so long, to see Devil's Tower and have it be a mystery in the film, because it's like, that's Devil's Tower in Wyoming. It's like the thing from Close Encounters, right? Oh wait,
It's like watching
I can't
Citizen
know
Kane.
Wait, yeah,
like-
exactly.
I'm like
slide.
metagaming inside my own head of this movie of like, well, I know how it ends because that's Wyoming. Shut up. What is it?
He's claimed that over the past, however many years he's been making movies, that the final 30 minutes of the film is the hardest thing that he's ever had to edit.
Yeah.
But there's just, I don't know, like, they played it at the drive-in. I went to go see it at the drive-in, and it was like sitting there at the drive-in, and then that final thing happens. It's like, I don't know, that's me going to church and somebody getting up and speaking in tongues. Like, it's like that's a religious experience to me. And there's so much
ideas
anticipation and
Yeah, the
everything that's
anticipation
going
is-
on too. We have so many extras. We have such an elaborate set. The board behind them with the lights that correlates to the music that they're playing. The music that they're playing alone, like so much of this film, you're just observing, and he doesn't bother to bog it down with the exposition. Like we said, the film just starts. Like we are off and running.
Yep.
It's never like, well, there might be aliens. It's just air traffic control being like, do you want to report a UFO? And them all being like, nah, no, I don't think so. But everyone's like, that's what it was. And then we're in it, we're going. And then once we get to the climax, we're right there with Roy, where we don't know what the hell is going on, but this is so amazing and so fantastic, and the ship is there, and it opens, and boom, 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 and then with the tuba and everything, and you're just, I don't know what's happening, but I love it so much.
Right. And like,
And if you were there, you'd be elbowing people next to you, going, what's going on? They're like, I don't know.
and I
Shut
have,
up and watch.
It's hard because I saw this film as a kid and grew up on it. Whenever I know someone's going to see it for the first time, I'm always like, there's always a little bit of me. It's like, oh my God, I hope it still holds up. I hope it still holds up.
Right.
Because I don't know how to. Like, if you came here and like, I don't get it, guys. Like, I wouldn't know what to say to you.
Right.
Because I just feel like
Episode over, show canceled.
It's
Just
like
done.
It's like showing someone Field of Dreams for the first time. And they're like, but why are they in the cornfield? It's like, well, I don't. Because they are. Like,
Because that's the heartland.
It'd be so sad.
But it's like, I don't know how, because you're right, it just starts and like he doesn't bog anything down with exposition.
No,
like, even when
you
they
don't
start,
have to.
even when they get to the part where, so they're in India and all the people are singing the music that's coming from the, like, no one says like, oh, this is what they heard.
Right.
Or no, they have the thing where they point to the sky. But then the next scene is that they're in this conference and they're all sitting there and they pass out this thing, which is the hand gestures. And at no point does no one say like, oh, well, we've decoded this and this is now hand gestures and this is how we're going to communicate to the aliens. You just kind of have to, it just kind of goes.
Yeah.
And you just have to follow along and put those pieces together.
And he trusts us to do that.
And sometimes I
That's why
think,
it's so great.
I think, is it just because I was raised with it and I kind of just took it on blind faith that I can follow this movie and this movie means so much to me? Or is it, there's some poor choices in the writing and the editing of this movie and it doesn't really follow you on a straight line or give you the information you need.
Right.
But I'm glad.
That was one of my only criticisms watching the film, is there are parts of it that don't necessarily feel connected. It feels like things are missing or pieces are missing. But it all works together so well that you can make those jumps. You don't have to be spoon-fed. And then once it was over and like I kind of there were a few dark spots in the story where I was just like, well, okay, do I get it all? Then I read about the special editions and all that stuff, and I was like, oh, I bet it's all in there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like adding in scenes into Star Wars. It's like, well, these are scenes that I wanted at the time. It makes sense without. We don't need them.
Right.
If you want to put them in and they actually add to it, great. but for the most part, it's pretty easy to follow.
I would say like between the theatrical cut and the director's cut, like the special edition, I tell people like don't even do it.
Right, and I think he does too.
Yeah. But the theatrical cut is it's more traditionally Roy Neary's story all the way through, and like the Truffaut storyline and all the other storylines are kind of B to C. And with the director's cut, it's more like, I've always said like this, like I've always wanted to write a paper about this, but that it almost started it's kind of like Magnolia,
Yeah.
where it's like a bunch of different characters, and then we're leading up to this big,
where they all come together,
crazy moment where something happens that shouldn't happen, but it happened, and it has a very kind of Altman-esque storyline where it's just it's like an ensemble piece with a bunch of different characters, and you don't, as you're going through it, you don't necessarily know how it's all going to connect together, and then all of a sudden it all leads to the same point. And it's also it's a very spiritual film.
Yeah.
It's, I don't think there's a mistake that at the beginning of the movie they're watching the Ten Commandments. And then,
No, I think that's very deliberately done, yeah.
And then I think this is only in the director's cut and it wasn't in the original theatrical, but there was a whole scene with the family beforehand when we first meet Richard Dreyfuss, where he gets a paper and he's like, oh my God, Pinocchio is playing. We're going to see Pinocchio.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I don't want to see a dumb cartoon. And like it's like the two movies that they're talking about in this is a fantasy film called Pinocchio and a religious film called The Ten Commandments. And there's almost a way that you can see Roy Neary as Moses, and he's going up to Mount Sinai, and he's gonna, God or aliens are gonna come down and they're gonna unite. But like, you can see this as a religious film without it being a religious film.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Anyone can. Same thing with E.T. Of it being sort of a Christ story.
Yeah, very much so.
We should talk about Carrie Guffey plays, what, is it Billy? Bobby?
No,
Boy. No, I can't think of it.
Barry.
I had to hear Melinda Dillon saying, Barry!
She's not a great mom, guys.
She's not a good mom. Wowza.
I forgot how many times that kid runs off and she's like, Barry, and I'm like, oh my God.
There's that one scene
Hold
where he's
his
out in the
hand.
field and
What
she's
are
just
you
yelling out
doing?
the window and it's like, he's gone.
I mean, I'm not a mom, but
Get to it.
come on.
Was hit by a truck.
Seriously. And then she pulls him up. This is dumb. But when she pulls him after he doesn't get hit and then he runs off and she's like, oh, I have to go get him. They're still in the middle of the road. Just made me mad. I had to say that anyway.
4 years old, was almost nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this movie.
Really?
Yeah, because they were so impressive. I mean, he's a 4-year-old.
Can't understand half the stuff he says. He's a kid.
It's 1977. They had lower standards.
I guess. I mean, he's good. He's a good kid, but some of the stuff, whatever. Continue.
Apparently.
I would have
Continue
liked
with
that.
your facts.
He would have beat out Tatum O'Neal as being the youngest person to win the Academy Award.
She was
and
great.
that wouldn't be.
No,
That wouldn't be
good.
right because she's much better in Paper Moon.
Yeah.
But apparently he was so good, Spielberg started calling him One Take Carrie, and actually had made T-shirts made.
That's
of
cute.
that, which is adorable.
I mean, he was very good. I'm not saying he wasn't, but please.
And you hear stories of how these kinds of directors are able to get such great performances from kids, and you kind of just store those in your toolbox for the future of all right, in order to get him to smile, he had a guy in a gorilla suit pop up out of a box. So it surprised him and got his attention. And then next to that box was another box with a guy inside dressed like a clown. And he pops out. And then he's super excited. And it's okay, gorillas and clowns. That's how you get kids to act well, I guess.
And then
Terrifying.
when he goes up to the window with when the aliens are coming to take him, he's looking out the window, and then all of a sudden he's like, toys, toys.
Yeah.
So Spielberg had, there was a box that was all wrapped up, and he started just unwrapping it one at a time. So at like a certain point, he's like licking his lips and he's salivating. And then when he opens up the box, he takes out the toys, and that's when he's like, toys.
Yeah.
That's what I thought he always said. I always was like, why is he saying toys? But now that
Because the
makes
spaceships
sense.
look like toys.
But they also look like toys. Yes, that's why I always thought it was because spaceships look like toys.
I mean, I got a bunch of trivia if you guys want to know trivia.
I'm sure you do. I got a bunch of
I have-
a bunch of behind the scenes stuff in my
Before
back
we
pocket.
do that, though, we have to talk about the weightless truck scene on the railroad tracks because, and I told Rachel that I have seen that scene countless times because it's always in like featurettes and retrospectives
Yeah, 'cause
and
it's
all that other cool stuff.
Awesome practical scene.
But I love this era of Spielberg because he's able to do so much practically. We have the scene in Poltergeist where he does the exact same thing, where he's sitting in the truck, everything starts going haywire, and then all of a sudden he just goes weightless and everything falls out of the dash and everything falls out from behind the thing. And knowing what they do, you're like, wow, that's practical and that's cool. But for the first time, like in '77, watching that had to just blow your mind to see what's going on. And it's as simple as the truck is on a set that can rotate 360 degrees. And he's just seatbelted in, and you can tell that he's holding himself in place. It's just acting around everything that's going on. But they just rotate the truck around and all the crap falls out and he's just in it and everything. It's just so cool. And I wish that was like a Universal Studios ride, of like the Close Encounters ride where you can get in and do that thing.
You know what I love about that scene?
Everything.
Well, yeah, but it's all over, and then the flashlight goes off, and he's like, ah!
I do love that part.
It's so funny.
It's so funny.
Because I would freak out too.
It's such a good, it's one of those good, I know M. Night Shyamalan always talks about this in horror movies, and what I love about horror movies is there's always that moment of like, laughter and comedic relief, and that's one of those that like this like kind of scary what just happened thing happened, and then it's just this flashlight scares him, and then that's I love moments like that. Spielberg does a good job with that in his films too. In films like this, like science fiction and things like that, they need those little moments because the rest of it is very serious and like what is happening.
Yeah, and you have to be able to laugh, otherwise you'll just start crying and you'll have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, but I do love that moment. Oh, it's made me laugh every time I watch the movie because it's just funny.
Also, I love that he has a pull-down map in the cab of his pickup. That's just so random. But I guess he works for the Department of Work, so I guess that makes sense. But
And it was before MapQuest, so.
It was.
what do you got behind the scenes stuff? Because I'm curious.
Oh man, so the idea
Let's
about
pause.
sure.
Just gotta go.
I should probably go. I mean, I guess I could wait a few more minutes.
Do you want to hear the behind the scenes stuff, or do you want to?
I
Bid
could.
farewell.
I might be there. Yeah, I could say it for 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Go.
All right. So the idea of the mothership. So originally he thought like, okay, it's just going to be a black mass, and it's just going to block out the sky. Like you'll see stars, and then you won't see stars. Then he thought it should be like a triangle, a big triangle, like the stealth bomber. But then he was driving by the set, and he saw a big oil refinery.
In India.
And he's like, that looks cool. So what if we take the kind of like the shell shape and put a city underneath it that looks like that?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, all right. And then that's the mothership.
I love stuff like that.
He also wanted it to look like the San Fernando Valley, just all lit up like that. And also in the design, they just needed stuff. They needed to fill it. So there's an R2-D2 in there, a mailbox, an airplane, and a police car. Like all of the toys that we see in Barry's room end up in there. You can't see them, but if you know to look, you can definitely find them. And the actual ship itself is in the Air and Space Museum, which I don't think we saw it when we were there, or I think I would have freaked out. But
You hadn't seen the movie yet. You'd
I know,
probably
but
be like, oh, it's the
I still would
spaceship.
recognize it. Be like, I need to see that movie.
So the opening sequence that's in the desert, and there's the windstorm and everything. That originally wasn't in the movie, and The Exorcist at the opening when they're in, where are they? North Africa or something. But that inspired him to. He's like, oh, okay, we gotta open this movie differently, and we gotta do this. And then apparently he would watch movies every night. So he'd watch something like The Exorcist, he'd watch something like The Searchers. And
I already watched The Searchers repeatedly.
And the
Makes
joke
sense.
was, Vilmo Sigmund said, you know, we could get this movie done if you stopped watching movies. Because you're coming to me and you're adding shots, and we can't add shots.
They
funny.
wanted to shoot this in Monument Valley, but it was just too impractical to try to control that environment so much. So they actually shot the bulk of it in a unused hangar in Mobile, Alabama, of all places. And I read conflicting reports that it was so big and the set was so massive that it basically had like its own climate in there. I read that it would rain indoors because it would get so humid and then it would get trapped.
Oh.
But then I read something else that said that that was erroneous. But there was a big windstorm that ripped off side of the building at one point too. So it's these big movies, you just can't make them apparently because the Star Wars set gets destroyed, Waterworld set gets destroyed. Anytime you build a big set for fantasy, somebody's trying to take it down apparently.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't control the Earth.
Exactly.
Stupid sentence.
Two of the biggest laughs in the movie for me, one, when the mothership first arrives and Richard Dreyfuss comes down and the guy runs into the bathroom because he's scared. And then when the mothership hits the big note and the glass smashes, that was an added shot, and Spielberg had to pay for the glass smashing himself because he wanted it so much.
That's silly.
That's pretty funny.
Spielberg likes people hiding in bathrooms, doesn't he?
Right?
And he did it in Jurassic Park too.
I did do it in Jurassic Park. Yeah.
Sometimes you just gotta hide in the toilet. All right, Rachel unfortunately has to leave.
Goodbye.
She's got to get to a rehearsal. Thank you so much for joining
Thank you
us.
for being here.
No problem.
You're the best, and I love you.
You seem like you wanted to shake hands.
No, this is a gesture.
It didn't go away though. It just stayed there.
I don't know. Go away.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Would you like some trivia?
Yes.
All right. You already mentioned one of them, but so I'll do the rest. What the crowd in India are chanting, the Aya Re Aya, means he has come. I thought that was interesting. It's partly inspired by... the story itself is partly inspired by when Spielberg was a kid. In the middle of the night, his parents grabbed him and his siblings and were like, come on, we gotta go. And they went out to a field to watch a meteor shower. Which, thinking about that, as a kid, I'd be like, I don't care. But as an adult, it's like, this is awesome, you need to see it.
Right. And as a kid, like you're like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But then you see it and you're like, ugh.
Space, the final frontier. So the title, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I never knew what it meant. And then I found out what it meant. According to a UFOologist, which is a thing, there are 4 kinds of contact. The first kind is seeing one or more UFOs. The second is the observation of physical evidence of an extraterrestrial visitation. And the third is contact with one or more extraterrestrials. Really, this film should have been called The Fourth Encounter because he then gets on the ship and leaves.
Right.
But for the most part, it is the third, which is really neat.
What's cool is that because he wanted to name it that, and Columbia Pictures was just like, you can't name, like, what is that? No,
It means
nobody
nothing.
knows what that means. So they put out a whole ad campaign about,
The different kinds of encounters. Genius. This is one of the, at least one of his only films, one of the few films that the film itself is edited to match the score. Because John Williams had the score complete, and then he wanted it to be very lyrical and very musical, so he then cut it to fit to the score. He also didn't cut it in a editing suite or in a studio. He cut it in a rented hotel room under guard.
wow.
And he kept the model for the mothership locked in his garage. Because at this time especially, there was such a push for direct-to-TV, made-for-TV stuff, and they really wanted to be the first. So they kept this under very, very close security, so much so, I have it in here, it was so tight that Spielberg himself was once denied access to the soundstage because he forgot his ID card. It's like, well, I mean, that's good that we're this secure. I'll go back to the hotel, I guess. The amazing cloud effect of the ships coming into the atmosphere was achieved by injecting white paint into a tank that was half salt water, half fresh water, because it would go through the fresh water, and then when it hit the salt water, it was too dense and it would just dissipate out like that and create that amazing effect. Spielberg also said that, I can't remember if it was in relation to Columbia pushing or just trying to shoot on location, but he said, if we hadn't been able to do it the way we did, I'd still be out in the desert trying to get clouds to form, which I thought was funny. Ray Bradbury considered this the greatest science fiction film ever made. That's a pretty high accolade from creator of Star Trek himself. This film is screened every night at Devil's Tower Campground, which makes it the most screened film ever. To which, if I worked there or was camping there, I'd be like, okay, I've seen it. Can we just watch Despicable Me or something, please?
I'd be the crazy guy. I'd be like, are you ready? Are you ready to see Close Encounters?
Yeah, we watched it twice already, Dad. God. He shot the special effects sequences on 70 millimeter film, and he shot the rest of the film on 35 because he had noticed so many science fiction films at the time, you could really tell when they were coming. Like, you could see the grain change.
Yep.
And you can see it in Star Wars, especially anytime that they're in space, because everything kind of has a box around it. It's the 70s. It's the late 70s. They're doing the best they can, but looking at it, you're like, This one is even less so than Star Wars, which is, again, impressive because it's the same time frame. But you can tell that it's a lot of like layered projection and like mats and stuff like that, that the sky is usually not the sky that they're looking at. Right. And this is pre-CGI, so you got to give these actors credit too for being able to act against nothing. And Dreyfuss has said that he didn't like his performance in a lot of the scenes because he didn't know what he was acting against. And seeing the final product, he's like, well, I would have done it differently. I would have acted differently towards that had I known what it was. This film holds the record for the most cinematographers with 11, considering all the re-releases and the special editions and all that other stuff. And you had mentioned the cinematographer earlier won an Academy Award for this. He was almost fired from the film because the producer from Columbia just didn't get what he was doing. Particularly the stuff with the mothership at the end. He had it very backlit and oversaturated and fuzzy so that they would be silhouetted. She's like, no, this looks terrible. What are you doing? So she made them reprocess the film without that. And then it looked like children in rubber suits with masks. And he's like, no,
Right.
Put it back. And he ultimately won out. Spielberg was unsatisfied with the original cut, hence why he did the other ones, but he said that it had a lack of wowness because he wasn't able to do all the things he wanted to do. We had talked about the design of the mothership. One of the abandoned ideas was they were going to have the ships look like corporate logos, like McDonald's or Chevron or what have you, being that they had like observed life on Earth and they're like, oh, these are familiar, friendly symbols to these people. We'll present ourselves as that so that we seem non-threatening. And finally, all the aliens, when they come off the ship, are played by local girls in Alabama. And I don't know why it needed to specify, but it specified that he cast girls instead of boys because they moved more gracefully as the aliens. And also the design of Puck is based on, I can't remember his name, Cary Guffey's appearance, because having been abducted, it's like, oh, well, this is the young one. I guess the young ones look like this, et cetera, et cetera.
And, you'd mentioned that, Puck, in terms of special effects, was a precursor to E.T., and that his idea for E.T. came from that, was like, the original idea was that, okay, Richard Dreyfuss is going up to them, and Puck's going to go with the scientists, kind of like a foreign exchange.
Right.
So he was originally going to kind of start the idea for E.T. with that in mind, of like, this is an alien that's come down to, be friendly and teach us things. Right. But then he kind of scrapped that idea, but that was what kind of got him to thinking about, oh my God, what would happen if an alien was left behind here?
They're essentially like a first and second part of the same film.
Yeah.
If you think about it. And what a fun double bill that would be. It would be long. It would be a long night, but that would be so fun. And you know that he's just got it in his mind for like, because E.T. was what, 81, 83? This is 77, so it's like, he makes this, and then only a handful of years later, he's like, I need to go back to that.
Yep.
I need to tell another alien story. And then 20 years later, he does War of the Worlds too. So he's really entrenched in the, I feel like it's the 50s nostalgia of the man from outer space coming down and live long and prosper and all that good stuff.
And that, like he says now that he doesn't believe it as much as he did then, but like when he was making this movie that he bought into it and he was like, no, they are here. Like there's you can't just explain this away. Like there's got to be a reason. There's got to be actual extraterrestrials that are out there that want to make contact with us. But he's now since turned into the Navy guy that says with all these cameras flashing, like there would be evidence.
Yeah. But I still want to believe. I want to believe, like the X-Files taught us.
Speaking of that this started that.
Yeah.
Before this, there wasn't really. It was always the government was against whatever was coming down, or was trying to figure it out. But I mean, this was like the first time where it was like, no, like the government knows, and they're behind all this, and there's a conspiracy and all this stuff. Like it's like, it laid the ground floor for what would become X-Files. Yeah. Even like, and it's hard. We've been talking about like how Spielberg was a master of this, of like combining real life characters, human characters, with this spectacle. Yeah. And there's so many directors now that kind of look to this film or look to his other films and say like, that's the model that we're going for. Right. And nobody quite gets it.
No. It's the right combination of heart and imagination. And so many people are too focused on getting the aliens to look right, or getting the ship to look right, or like doing it in such a way that it's going to satisfy audiences for what they think alien life is going to be. And it's like, no, just put your own stamp on it. Like, I wouldn't imagine the aliens coming out looking like that. Right. But they do, and I go, all right. And that's something that I love about science fiction, because you see these designs, you look at like Rick and Morty or Men in Black or anything like that, where it's really fantastical, non-humanoid aliens. Of course. Why would they look like us? They're from another world. They're from another part of the universe. There's no way that, and it's just kind of ignorant for us to be like, well, they should look like us. Right. No. They're going to look like
sort of like us.
Yeah. They're not going to come out in the silver jumpsuit like the 50s. That's aliens looking at us and trying to blend in or look like us to not be frightening or anything. And I prefer it to be, I want my aliens to be themselves. That's what it is. That's what it boils down to.
He taps into a genuine sense of wonder, and the part of you that when you go outside and you look up and you see the sky and you see all these stars, like that I'm still awed by that. Like that's what he taps into, and that's what I think is missing, even from got a little bit of it back from Ready Player One, but even like the films that he's making today don't have that sense of awe as much.
He's in his 70s now.
Well, I know.
I was just going to be making biscuit commercials or something, I used to say. Cool. Wonderful episode. Thanks for adding that on. Thanks, Rachel. She did have to go, but she knows that she's great. Next week, The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
I can't wait. You got to do a screening of this at Main Street Landing. Yep. I haven't seen it in a while, but I did play the Scarecrow in high school, so I'm very excited to revisit one of my favorites. And then the week after that is Star Wars.
Yippee skippy.
It's going to be great. All right. So until next time, I'm Lincoln L. Hayes.
I'm David Metzger.
Thanks to Rachel Riendeau Hayes. And we'll see you guys next time.